The cowboy saved an injured girl. What her Apache mother said next changed everything forever. Cade had never thought much of the vast, empty stretches of land, but today they seemed even emptier than usual. The wind whistled as it swept across the flat plains, stirring the dust and pushing Cade's horse, Thunder, to move faster. He had been riding for hours looking for a sign of life, anything to break the silence. His mind wandered, but it was the loneliness that often followed him that kept him grounded. He had learned long ago that out here in the endless land, survival was simple. Just you, the land, and the sky. Cade's thoughts were interrupted when Thunder suddenly whinnied and slowed his pace. The horse's ears twitched and Cade immediately pulled on the reins, his eyes scanning the area. Something wasn't right. Thunder pawed at the earth nervously, and Cade's gut twisted with the feeling that something was wrong. He nudged Thunder forward, riding cautiously toward the small ridge ahead. At first all Cade could see were the scattered remnants of a recent storm. A torn canvas tarp flapped in the wind, half buried in the dirt. A few broken branches lay across the ground like scattered bones, but as he crested the ridge, his heart skipped a beat. A young girl, no older than 16 or 17, lay unconscious on the ground, her clothes torn and dirty. Blood stained the dirt beneath her, and she was barely breathing. Her chest rose and fell weakly, but Cade could see that her condition was critical. Her long black hair was matted with dirt, and her body was bruised, as if she had been thrown around by something much larger than her. Cade's instincts kicked in immediately. His calloused hands moved with precision as he dismounted. He knelt by the girl's side, his heart pounding in his chest. The girl's skin was pale, and her breathing was shallow. He could see no signs of anyone else around, no one to help her. He was alone with a girl who looked like she had been left to die. He glanced at the horizon. The wind had picked up, and the storm had started to return, the clouds darkening in the distance. Cade knew he had no time to waste. He couldn't leave her like this. He had seen enough suffering in his own life to know how it felt to be abandoned. He couldn't turn his back on her. Carefully, he rolled the girl onto her back, cradling her head gently in his hands. He examined her injuries. Her leg was twisted in an unnatural angle, likely broken, and several deep cuts ran down her arms. But it was the gash on her side that worried him most. The wound was deep, and it was still bleeding. "Hold on, girl," he muttered under his breath as he searched his saddlebag for supplies. He had no doctor's kit, just the basics, bandages, a few healing herbs, and some water. His hands worked quickly, but gently, as he dressed her wounds. The world around them seemed to fade as Cade focused only on getting her stable. Once her injuries were treated as best as he could, Cade stood and looked around again. He had to get her to safety. He couldn't carry her all the way back to town, not without risking both their lives in the storm. He needed to find shelter, and fast. Thunder snorted and stomped nervously as Cade carefully lifted the girl into his arms, cradling her like she was something precious. She weighed nothing in his arms, but the weight of responsibility hung heavily on him. He was a cowboy, not a doctor, not a hero. He wasn't used to saving anyone but himself. But today, fate had dealt him a different hand. Cade glanced down at her once more. Her face was peaceful now, despite the bruises and blood, but she was no longer struggling to breathe. It seemed like she was holding on, waiting for something, someone, to help her. He turned to Thunder, who was still anxious, sensing the urgency of the situation. Cade made a decision. He wouldn't risk the girl's life any longer by trying to move her too far. There was an abandoned ranch nearby, a place he knew well, a refuge where he could get her through the worst of it. It was the closest thing to safety. The wind howled as Cade mounted Thunder, carefully adjusting the girl in his arms. He kicked his heels into Thunder's sides, and the horse started at a steady trot. Cade kept his eyes on the horizon, watching for signs of any other dangers, knowing they were not safe yet. Thunder moved with a surety that Cade appreciated. It was almost as if the horse could sense the urgency of the moment. As they rode, Cade's mind wandered back to the girl's injuries. He didn't recognize her, but her clothes and features told him everything he needed to know. She was Apache, there was no mistaking it. The realization hit him hard. He had been born into a world where Apaches were often seen as enemies, but here he was, carrying one of their own. He had no idea how they would respond to this act of kindness. Would they see him as a savior? Or a threat? The wind carried the scent of rain as the storm clouds moved closer. Cade didn't have time to ponder the consequences. He focused on the task at hand, riding faster now. The ranch wasn't far, but it felt like miles. Each step of Thunder's hooves a tick of the clock that Cade couldn't afford to ignore. Minutes felt like hours as he reached the abandoned ranch. The roof was half collapsed, and the barn was little more than a shell of its former self. But the stone house still stood, albeit weathered and worn. Cade brought Thunder around to the back, where a small stable offered some protection from the wind. Carefully, he dismounted, keeping the girl close. She was still unconscious, but her breathing had become more steady, a sign that she wasn't in immediate danger. For now, that was enough. Cade settled her on a bed of hay in the stable, making sure she was comfortable and warm. He stepped outside for a moment to gather his thoughts. The storm was only getting worse, and the wind screamed through the trees. He had to keep her safe, no matter what. As he looked back at the stable, his thoughts shifted to the Apache girl in his care. He didn't know who she was, or why she had been abandoned like this, but he knew one thing for sure. He had made a choice to help her, and now he would see it through. Cade could only hope that what came next would make the risk worth it. The storm raged outside, its howls muffled by the thick walls of the old ranch house. Inside, Cade sat by the small fire he'd built, keeping a careful eye on the girl. Her breathing had steadied through the night, but she still hadn't woken up. Cade had taken her injuries seriously, but he knew the real test would come when she opened her eyes. He kept watch over her, running through his own thoughts in a quiet, steady rhythm. He couldn't shake the feeling that the girl's presence here meant something more than a simple accident. She wasn't just some lost traveler. She was Apache, and that made everything more complicated. It was one thing to help someone, but it was another entirely to save someone from a people he'd been taught to fear and mistrust. But Cade had lived enough years alone to know that a person's worth wasn't determined by their tribe or background. A person's worth was in their actions, and what he had done for this girl had nothing to do with her heritage. It was simply the right thing to do. As he sat, he tried to ignore the creeping worry. The storm had passed, and the clouds had begun to part. But a deep silence followed the storm, a kind of stillness that Cade didn't trust. Something was about to change. After several hours, the girl stirred. Cade watched carefully as her eyes fluttered open. Her gaze was unfocused at first, but then her eyes locked on him. She didn't speak right away, but her lips parted slightly as though struggling to find words. "You're safe now," Cade said softly, trying to reassure her. His voice was rough but gentle. He didn't know what else to say. The girl blinked again, and then, her voice barely a whisper, she spoke. "Who are you?" He had always prided himself on his silence. Being a cowboy meant that you didn't talk much. But here, in this moment, words were important. "My name's Cade. I'm the one who found you out there," he explained. "You've been hurt. I had to bring you here to keep you safe." She shifted slightly, trying to sit up, but immediately flinched in pain. Cade placed a hand on her shoulder gently to keep her steady. "Easy now," he said, his voice calm. "You're hurt. You need to rest." Her eyes scanned the room, settling on the stable walls before returning to him. "Where am I?" "I thought it would be the safest place for now," Cade said. "The storm's gone, but it's still dangerous out there. You need to heal before we go anywhere." The girl nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful but cautious. She hadn't said much since waking, and Cade could see the confusion in her eyes. She was likely trying to understand why he, a cowboy, had helped her, a member of the Apache tribe. Cade couldn't blame her for being wary. He had spent his life being told who to fear, who to trust, and who to avoid. Yet here he was, tending to someone from the very tribe that most would consider his enemy. "My name is Tala," she said after a moment, her voice gaining strength. "I was with my people. Then..." She trailed off as if the memory was too painful to revisit. Cade could sense the weight of her silence, and for the first time he realized how alone she must have felt. Her people, her tribe. She had been torn away from them by fate, and now here she was, in the care of a man who wasn't even part of her world. "I'm sorry," Cade said, his voice softening. "I didn't mean to cause you any trouble, but you weren't going to survive out there alone. I just did what anyone would have done." Tala's eyes softened, but there was still a wariness in them. "Anyone?" she repeated, as if testing the words. "But you're not one of us." "No, I'm not. I'm a cowboy. I've lived alone most of my life." Tala studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing yet gentle. She said nothing for a while, and Cade felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. She was trying to figure him out just as he was trying to figure her out. And yet, in the quiet of the stable, they were connected by something simple: survival. Cade stood, feeling the weight of the conversation settle around him. "I'll get you something to eat. You need to keep your strength up." He moved toward his saddlebag, but Tala's voice stopped him. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her words lingering in the stillness. "You could have left me." "Many would have." Cade turned back to face her, his expression serious. "Because you were hurt, and that's enough reason for me." Tala seemed to think about that for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly as she processed his response. Her eyes dropped to the ground before she looked back up at him. "Not all people are like that," she said quietly. "Not all of them." He was still learning that not everything fit into the neat boxes he had been taught. He had always thought of Apache as enemies, but here he was, caring for one of their own. And Tala, she wasn't what he expected at all. She wasn't an enemy. She was just a girl, hurt and lost, with no one to help her. He handed her a small bowl of stew he had managed to cook. "Eat something," he said gently. "It'll help you feel better." Tala hesitated before accepting the bowl. Her hands shook slightly as she took it, but she nodded her thanks. As she ate, Cade stepped back and gave her space. He didn't need to crowd her. She had her own thoughts, her own struggles, and Cade wasn't about to make them worse. Minutes passed before Tala finished the meal. She set the bowl aside and looked up at Cade. "I need to return to my people," she said, her voice firm now. "I can't stay here." Cade's heart sank at the thought. He had known this moment would come, but hearing her say it made it real. She didn't belong here with him. She belonged with her tribe. He had been a stranger to her when he found her, and he was still a stranger to her now. "I understand," Cade said, his voice steady. "But you're not well enough to travel yet. You need to heal first." Tala shook her head, her expression stubborn. "I'll go now," she insisted. "I have to go back." Cade wasn't going to argue. He knew that once the storm had passed, she would want to be with her people. But he also knew that it wasn't safe for her out there alone. "Not yet," Cade repeated softly. "Stay here until you're strong enough. Then we'll figure out the best way to get you back to your people." Tala didn't say anything in reply, but the tension in her shoulders relaxed just a little. She knew Cade was right, but there was a war inside her, one between duty and survival. In that moment, Cade understood something deeper than words could say. This wasn't just about saving her. It was about giving her the chance to return home, and that was all he could do for her now. The days passed slowly in the abandoned ranch house. Cade kept his routine simple, making sure Tala had everything she needed to heal. Her wounds were beginning to mend, but the real battle was within her. There was a fire in her eyes, a burning desire to return to her people, to find her tribe. Cade knew that. It was all she talked about, and yet, every time she tried to leave, her body betrayed her. She was too weak. She had barely eaten, barely slept. The road back to her people would be long, and Cade wasn't going to let her go until she was strong enough. Tala had begun to speak more freely now, telling Cade about her life. She had been raised in the Apache traditions, learning the ways of the land, the sky, and the animals. Her voice was soft when she spoke of her people, but there was a quiet pride in her words. She was an Apache warrior in her heart, even if her body wasn't ready to fight just yet. One afternoon, as the sun began to sink low on the horizon, Cade went out to fetch more firewood. He could feel the change in the air, a tension that wasn't just from the weather. He had learned over the years to trust his instincts, and right now, they were telling him something was about to happen. When he returned to the ranch, the unmistakable sound of hooves echoed in the distance. Cade's hand instinctively went to the revolver at his side, but he knew it wouldn't be of much use. He wasn't sure who was approaching, but he couldn't risk letting anyone see Tala. If it was a group of Apache warriors, things could turn dangerous quickly. The sound grew louder, and soon Cade could see the riders. A group of 3 figures coming toward the ranch. They rode with purpose, and their horses moved with a swift, practiced rhythm. Cade's heart beat faster. He knew these were not strangers. They were Apache. As they drew closer, Cade stepped into the open. His stance was steady, but his mind raced. He had no idea what he was going to say or do, but he had to be ready for anything. The riders stopped at a distance, eyeing him carefully. One of them, an older man with long braided hair and a weathered face, spoke first. "Who are you?" he asked in a deep, gravelly voice. "What are you doing here with one of our people?" He couldn't lie. He couldn't hide what he had done. "I found her," Cade said, pointing to the ranch house. "She was hurt, left for dead."
"I brought her here to heal."
The old man's gaze shifted toward the house. The other 2 riders, younger and more restless, remained on their horses, eyes narrowing as they studied Cade. The silence stretched for a long moment before the old man spoke again. "You are a cowboy," the man said, his tone cold, but not unfriendly. "And you took one of our own." "I didn't mean any harm. She was in danger, and I helped her. That's all." The old man's gaze softened slightly, and for a moment Cade thought the tension might break. But then, without a word, the old man turned his horse and motioned for the others to follow. They rode toward the house, and Cade felt his heart race again. What was going to happen now? Inside, Tala had heard the hooves too. She was already sitting up, looking toward the door with a mixture of fear and determination. Cade quickly moved to her side. "Stay here," he said quietly. "I don't know who they are, but I don't want you involved unless it's necessary." She didn't argue. She knew Cade was right. But she also knew that her people would not just ride in to chat. This wasn't a social visit. As the riders entered the house, Cade moved toward the door, his back to Tala. He heard the old man speak first, his voice steady, but with an underlying weight. "You are the one who saved her?" the old man asked. "I did," Cade replied, standing tall. Tala's mother, Sierra, emerged from the shadows of the room. She was tall, her long black hair braided in the traditional Apache style. Her eyes, dark and sharp, locked onto Cade with an intensity that made him feel as though she could see straight through him. Her gaze held no judgment, just a quiet, unyielding strength. She stepped forward, her movements slow but purposeful. "You saved my daughter," she said, her voice a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "Why?" Cade hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to answer. He had never been good with words, but he had learned the importance of truth. He looked Sierra in the eye. "I couldn't leave her out there. No one deserves to be left for dead." Sierra's expression softened, but only slightly. Her eyes flickered toward Tala, who had remained silent but was now watching the exchange closely. "Tell me, Cowboy," Sierra continued, her voice unwavering, "what do you know of our ways, of our people?" Cade didn't expect the question, and it caught him off guard. "Not much," he said, his voice quiet, "but I know that I couldn't turn my back on someone who needed help. That's all I can offer. I'm no hero, just a man who did what seemed right." Sierra studied him for a long moment, her gaze unreadable. Finally she spoke, her voice softer now, though it still held the weight of authority. "You have done what few men would do," she said. "You have shown kindness to one of my people. But I must ask you to leave now. My daughter must return to our tribe."
Cade felt a pang of regret at her words.
He had known this moment would come, but hearing it from her made it real. Tala was a part of her people, and she couldn't stay in this strange world that Cade had given her shelter in. But he also knew that she wasn't ready to return yet, not without the strength to face whatever awaited her. "I won't stop her from going home," Cade said, his voice steady. "But you should know, she's not strong enough yet. The road will be dangerous for her." Sierra looked at him, and for a moment there was something in her eyes that softened. "I know," she said quietly, "but it is her destiny. She must return whether she is ready or not." Cade didn't say anything else. He understood now. He wasn't meant to keep her. He had helped her because it was the right thing to do, but the time had come for her to face her future. "Take care of her," Sierra said, "and know this, the Apache will not forget your kindness. There is a bond now between us, even if we are not of the same blood." Cade nodded, his chest heavy. "I won't forget either." As the Apache riders turned to leave, Sierra stayed behind for a moment. She stepped closer to Cade, her eyes softening just a little. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter now. "You may not understand it, but you have changed everything for us." Cade watched them ride away, the weight of their words settling on his shoulders. He didn't know what the future held for him or for Tala, but one thing was clear. His life would never be the same. The morning after Sierra and the riders left, Cade stood at the edge of the ranch, looking out over the endless horizon. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The world around him was quiet, but his thoughts were anything but. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life had changed in ways he couldn't yet understand. Tala had returned to her people, as she had to. It was her destiny, and Cade respected that. But in the days that followed, a part of him had been missing. The days felt longer, the nights colder. The silence of the ranch seemed heavier now, filled with the absence of her presence. He had done what was right, what any decent man would have done, but there was something deeper, something he couldn't name. A bond had formed between him and Tala, something that went beyond her being an Apache and him being a cowboy. It was about honor, about doing the right thing, even when the road was difficult. As he stood there, lost in thought, he heard the sound of hooves approaching. He turned to see a rider coming from the distance, kicking up the dust as they made their way toward the ranch. Cade instinctively reached for the rifle slung over his shoulder, but then he recognized the rider. It was Tala. His heart skipped a beat, and before he could stop himself, he was walking toward her. She rode with a purposeful, steady gait, her eyes focused ahead. There was something different about her, something stronger, as if she had found a new sense of purpose. She didn't speak when she arrived, but dismounted smoothly and stood before him. Cade's eyes studied her with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Tala, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice a bit rougher than he intended. "I thought you were going back to your people." "I was," she replied, her voice steady, but there was a quiet sadness in her eyes. "But I can't go back like this, not yet. Not without understanding." Cade looked at her, unsure of what she meant. "Understanding?" he repeated. "What do you mean?" Tala took a deep breath, her eyes lifting to meet his. "I know my place is with my people, but I've seen something. The world is changing, and I can't ignore it. What you did for me, it's more than just saving my life. You gave me something I didn't have before. A choice. I thought I was bound by tradition, by duty, but you showed me that there is more." Cade didn't know what to say at first. He had always believed in duty, in doing what was right, but he had never thought of it as giving someone a choice. He had helped Tala because it felt like the right thing to do. But hearing her words made him realize that maybe he had given her more than just shelter and safety. Maybe he had given her a chance to change her path. "What are you saying?" Cade asked softly. Tala hesitated, then stepped closer to him. "I'm saying that I want to find my own way. I don't want to just follow the path that was set before me. I want to make my own choices, and I need you to help me." Cade's heart pounded in his chest. He had never expected this. He had never thought that helping her would lead to this moment. He had spent his whole life living by the rules of his world, a cowboy's life with clear boundaries and duties. But now, Tala was asking him for something more. She was asking him to help her forge a new path. "You want me to help you?" Cade asked, his voice thick with uncertainty. "Yes," Tala said simply. "I need your help. You've shown me that there is more to life than duty. I want to learn from you, to find my own way. I want to live for more than just the past." Cade stood there for a long moment, staring at her. The weight of her words settled on him, and he felt something stir within him. He had always believed in living alone, in following the path of a lone cowboy, but the idea of helping Tala, of giving her the tools to make her own choices, to shape her own future, felt like something more meaningful than he had ever imagined. "Are you sure about this?" Cade asked quietly. "It won't be easy. It's a hard life, and there are risks. You've seen what the world can be like." Tala nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I'm sure. I know what I'm asking, but I can't go back. Not yet. I want to learn. I want to choose my own path, even if it's hard." Cade took a deep breath and nodded slowly. He hadn't expected to be part of her journey, but now it seemed inevitable. They had crossed paths for a reason, and maybe, just maybe, they could help each other find something new. "All right," Cade said, his voice firm. "I'll help you. But you have to be ready for the challenges that come with it. It won't be easy, but if this is what you want, I'll help you find your way." Tala smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you." The two of them stood there for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling in. Cade wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the right path. They would face the challenges together, one step at a time. Cade took Tala to the small cabin he had built on the ranch, where they spent the next few weeks working side by side. He taught her how to track, how to ride, and how to survive in the wilderness. Tala proved to be a quick learner, her Apache instincts guiding her every step of the way. It was clear that she had a strength and resilience that Cade hadn't expected, but it was also clear that she was still finding her place in the world. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. They shared stories of their lives, Cade of his lonely years on the trail, and Tala of the traditions of her people. They talked about what the future might hold, about the world beyond the ranch and the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tala turned to Cade, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you think we can change the world?" she asked, her voice quiet. Cade looked out at the vast land before them, the endless possibilities stretching out in every direction. He didn't have an answer. But for the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, they could. "I don't know," Cade said softly, "but we can sure try." And for the first time in a long time, Cade felt a sense of peace. He had done what was right for Tala, and in the process, he had found a new purpose. They were no longer bound by the past. They were walking a new path, together. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with both challenges and opportunities. But Cade was no longer the lone cowboy on the trail. He had found something worth fighting for. A new beginning, a new life, and the chance to shape his own future, side by side with Tala.